So I'll shut up and ask John, double billing of John. Yep. He's talking today now with his FIRA hat on and talking about packaging and sustainability. Thanks, John.
Hello again. This is really just an overview of thinking about packaging for our industry. And one of the things I do really want to get across is that there is, when people have the discussion around packaging, the first thing that people tend to say is we want to reduce packaging. But what you have to keep in mind is that packaging serves a function, and it's a very important function. And when we're talking about sustainability, particularly for our industry, it has a very, very important role to play. So I'm going to try and address those things as we go through what I want to say. Data from 2018 from the UK government suggested that 11 million tonnes of packaging waste was disposed of across the whole of the UK economy. Much of that waste comes from the food sector, and many packaging materials are not suitable for recycling, or they may be suitable for recycling, but the facilities to collect and recycle them do not exist that make it easy for people to recycle. And one of the things that we will focus on as we go through this is identifying your routes that where your packaging will become waste or available for recycling will depend on the solutions that you select, because not every distribution chain is going to work in the same way. So that's something you will automatically take into account when you are considering what is the optimum packaging solution for your product range and your distribution network. In our industry, what we are talking about very often is high value but very bulky items. It's not like the example that everyone gives is, I ordered a book from Amazon and it came in a 3-foot wide cardboard box filled with plastic chips. That is not the case. We have items that can be very easily damaged. I say high valued and are long-term items. So if they are damaged during transit, they will then become unsaleable, possibly, depending on what they are, and that might then that item becomes waste. And so the packaging is preventing waste going into the waste streams. So that's, again, an important point. Packaging serves a protective purpose, and it needs to be tailored to the product that's there. And again, focusing on what is the optimum use to achieve the ends that you need is important. And again, it will be different. The solutions you choose will be different depending on how much control you will have over the packaging at its delivery. If you are on the retail sector and the sort of domestic distribution sector, it's possible that you will be selling to someone too removed from you in the supply chain, or possibly even further. And so that packaging will then go into the domestic waste, and you will never get it back. So it could be recycled by the customer, but it will never come back to you. If you're in the contract side, it may be that you are delivering a whole range of products onto a site, and that you have the facility to unpack them and bring all the packaging waste back and either reuse or reclaim or recycle it yourselves. And so therefore the solutions that you choose would be completely different to the other scenario where you have no control over the packaging. So again, there are different things that you need to establish about what is important in your packaging chain. And again, the different range of materials. Now, a lot of the materials that are used, cardboard is used extensively. Advantages with the cardboard is that it is recycle. It can be recycled, it's recyclable, it's lightweight, and it can be reused. On the negative side, you've got to consider that it can be damaged quite easily and has very little resistance to things like moisture. So again, the distance, the nature of the transport is important. If you're doing your own delivery, that will be different than relying on shipping containers and third-party delivery organisations, because again, you have control, you have a quality control over what happens in that delivery function if it's your drivers who are actually providing that delivery service. So, what individual aspects should you be considering when optimizing your packaging? So obviously the nature of the product, what size is it, what shape is it, how fragile is it, what materials are there that could easily be damaged. Again, a lot of furniture will have polished surfaces, even glass, so those surfaces need protecting. And even textile materials and leathers, their surfaces can be damaged by impacts and scratches. So again, you've got to think about how you're going to protect those materials during transit. And again, the value of that product, if that product is damaged, what will that mean in terms of that product being replaced? And that's part of your, you've got to consider balancing that between the packaging and the product. Where is it coming from? Again, we already alluded to this. If you're transporting something across the world by sea freight, it will be completely different if you were driving something 5 miles down the road in your own van. Very different approaches that will need to be taken. And what will the conditions be? Obviously, here we are relatively fortunate. We have quite a temperate climate. But when products are produced in very hot and humid countries, you can have issues around excess moisture, mold growth, and often the packaging containers that they're shipped in will actually support and promote mold growth because of the temperature fluctuations and the conditions within the sealed packaging units might actually mean that by the time you get the product to its final destination after several weeks at sea, there is an issue regarding mould. And again, that is very much seasonal and will depend on the where and how it is protected at that packaging point. Again, is your packaging part of the product experience? Again, this is probably something that for furniture isn't as important, but for a lot of smaller goods it could be, that the product packaging contains a lot of important information that is important for the consumer and for some degree actually is part of the consumer experience. And again, where is the control over that packaging waste within that supply chain? Again, if you have it, you will perhaps choose different solutions than if it belongs to someone else, because then you're relying on how that is impacted. So there are a number of different positive things that are going on in packaging materials, particularly regarding recycled materials. Obviously, with the introduction of the plastic packaging tax last year, there's been a very market uptake of recycled plastic materials that aren't caught by the tax. But again, that has put pressure on the amount of recycled material in the supply chain in order to generate those recycled materials. And in cardboard, a lot of cardboard suppliers, they will actually be certified from sustainable sources, or using recycled card as well. So again, they can be recycled materials themselves. I will briefly mention bioplastics and biodegradable plastics. And again, a lot of time there can be confusion because these two terms, when people use them, they think about them being interchangeable. They're not. There are many bioplastics that are not biodegradable, and not all biodegradable plastics are bioplastics. Bioplastics means that the source material for the oil that has created the polymers has come from plant-based materials and from grown materials as opposed to fossil fuels. A biodegradable plastic is any polymer chain that will naturally degrade under the composting conditions over a set period. Again, there are very strict definitions about that. Again, a lot of whether these materials are suitable for your products will depend on the route of disposal. It's very important, though, if you're using biodegradable plastics, that they are clearly marked, and so that they do not end up in recycled materials, because that is one thing you cannot do with biodegradable plastic. They need to go somewhere where they will naturally degrade. And that does not mean landfill, because the landfill is not the right conditions to encourage biodegradability. It has to be somewhere where they can naturally biodegrade, because it needs the oxygen in the atmosphere and the microorganisms that actually are the mechanism of biodegradation. So that doesn't happen in a typical landfill site. So again, you've got to understand what the route of disposal of those are. And again, understanding what your materials are, difference between bioplastics and biodegradable plastics is always important. There have been people who are now experimenting with mycelium, sort of fungi-based natural materials, in replacing things like polystyrene foams. One of the problems with polystyrene foams is whilst they're very lightweight and are quite good at what they do, they're very difficult to capture and recycle because they are so lightweight, and in order to make the volumes economic to recycle, you have to capture so much, and the transporting of it becomes ridiculous, and it makes it very difficult to make that an economically viable route for reclaiming polystyrene. And again, some of the chemicals that are used in production of these polymers are not very pleasant, so there is a move away from them. But things like mycelium materials, they're grown matrices on using agricultural waste, and they can be grown to moulds to actually replace the direct materials. Whether the capacity is there to completely supply any supply chain to get away completely from polystyrene materials is yet to be seen, but we know that people are experimenting with them. As Jessica alluded to earlier, we're now moving towards the sort of extended producer responsibility. Data should be collected this year, which will need to be reported in 2024. And it's required if your turnover is in excess of £1 million and you're responsible for more than 25 tonnes of packaging per year. And that includes any packaging on imported goods, even if that will be discarded prior to sale. So again, you have to look at your whole supply chain as to what's coming in. This has really just been a sort of overview of some of the issues surrounding packaging. We produced a document at the beginning of 2021, which really summarised the situation as it was then, looked at some of the new materials, and really reviewed the pros and cons of all the existing materials to sort of help people coming to this as a review to get to grips with what their packaging requirements are. And that's available for FIRA members on the FIRA website, but also available for non-members to purchase from the FIRA website. And just it's an overview of materials and challenges. And we also have run some training courses in slightly more depth than this on some of these packaging issues. So hopefully that's been useful. And if there are any more questions, if I've got time.
Yeah, we're not so tight on time this afternoon, so go for it. No?
No.
Go for it.
One of the problems we have isn't necessarily, so particularly on cardboard, it's affected, is not necessarily using cardboard and using that as a removal. It's actually, you can recycle it, obviously, it's great, but actually finding people who want to take it is particularly challenging. And that's what we find. So we're constantly trying to find partners who want to take cardboard, and they're saying, well, no, we're not taking it yet. So actually, that I find is the biggest barrier. And I don't know if you guys have connections and you can help in those areas, but you were struggling, and we do struggle on a cyclical basis, really.
Yeah, I know that some organisations use waste brokers, and basically their waste brokers will find the best price for them for waste card or waste plastic, so that they try and deal with it in that way. But again, it will vary depending on what the demand is. It goes up and down depending on what's happening. Obviously, during the pandemic, there was a huge requirement for card from the distribution network. So again, it became very expensive. So people were looking to there. It would have been more easy to find someone to take it. But again, it will depend on what's happening. But I'd say brokers are probably the best option on that.
With regards to Rowan's question, I guess the point is there enough capacity to recycle all these cyclable materials that we're bringing in? What is the UK's capacity of the 11 million tonnes to actually, if it was all converted to recyclable material, can we even process it?
That's probably a very good question. I probably don't actually have the answers to that, but the targets that have been set in the producer responsibility areas have been set by government, and I think the government should take ownership of those, and if there's not the capacity there, then there needs to be some investment and some consideration of that, because people aren't going to be meeting 89% or whatever it is that's the requirement for card recycling if there's not capacity there.
If we're sending it all to landfill, it seems a little bit...
Yeah, but that's the point. They're saying the target should not be that. This is recycling as a target, and they're not. And from 2021, they've basically excluded energy from waste in that target. So it needs to be genuine recycling.
Thank you, John. That's appreciated. So I think the next session, I'm particularly pleased that you've joined us, Mike. Mike is the non-exec director of Carpet Recycling UK. I know we're called the Furniture Makers Company, but we actually embrace furnishings as a whole, and floor coverings being one of them. So I'm very grateful for you joining us today, and they're also part of our committee for the Furniture Makers Company's Climate Change Committee. So thank you for joining us, and I hand over to you.
Great. Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. And first of all, I'd like to thank Furniture Makers Company, if I can speak, for inviting Carpet Recycling UK to attend and present at what has been a great sustainability day so far, and I have no intention of changing that in the next quarter of an hour or so. I've learned so much already, and hopefully what I've got to say will continue that education theme through the afternoon. So, first and foremost, who are Carpet Recycling UK? Well, we were set up 16 years ago by a number of people within the industry with an objective of diverting carpet waste from landfill. So that was how it was set up 16 years ago. We've got, we're now the only ones who are actually focused on that. So we are the industry body looking at the challenge, and our membership covers all the links in the channel from manufacturing all the way through to retailers and contractors, and the people who actually use the product once it has reached its end of life. We also have developed links with similar companies in the EU and in the USA, which I'll talk about in a little while. And what we've done in the last 16 years is we've managed to divert landfill from 2% of total carpet waste in 2007 to 70% in 2020, which is the last year where we have the data for. And over that period, we've managed to divert over 1.5 million tonnes of carpet waste from landfill. So as well as having an annual 2-day conference, we've talked about, I've just mentioned the landfill rates that we've achieved, but obviously there's 30% still to go. We've increased our membership dramatically in the last couple of years, which allows us now to represent over 80% of the producers and importers of textile floor covering in the UK, which gives us a position to represent the industry as a whole in discussions with government and other bodies regarding the future legislation. I'll talk a bit more about social media in a moment, but we have raised the awareness of the whole issue and the challenges that we face across the industry to make it far more of a high-profile topic for most of the people involved in the industry, from manufacturer through distribution, retail, commercial, and reusers. We're looking to develop the best practice because, surprise, surprise, they don't exist, nor do standards in any shape or form. And we want, obviously, to educate policymakers, wish us luck on that one, Environment Agency being one, DEFRA and so on, so that they can better understand the issues that we face uniquely as an industry that may be different from other industries within the furnishing sector. COP26, we were involved in that. Now, we'll remember that from Glasgow from 18 months ago, and the government made a big thing about COP26 and how it was going to be green this and green that. But when it came to disposing of the carpet that was used, there was 60,000 square metres of carpet that were installed across the various exhibition halls for that 5-day event. At the end of the conference, the government didn't want to know about disposing of the product in an environmentally friendly way. As far as they were concerned, it could just all go in the skip. So we got involved and we engaged with exhibition company, the exhibition manufacturer, installer that was installing the carpet, and local housing associations in the Glasgow area, and we managed to divert 60% of that carpet away from landfill with literally 3 days' notice. So that's the sort of involvement we can get ourselves involved with. And we are working with other organisations, National Bed Federation and here today, to understand each other's challenges more and actually form a more cohesive approach for the furnishings industry as such. Some of you will recognise some of the names up there, some of our core members, the key manufacturers, some based in the UK, some based in the US, some based in continental Europe. As I say, we're now representing over 80% of the total manufacturing base. Now, moving on swiftly to the flooring waste, there was something like 467,000 tonnes of textile flooring waste produced in the UK in 2020, which is the last year we have any accurate data for. So it's a huge challenge that the industry faces in terms of diverting that. And this graph here shows, you can see the 30% there that hasn't been diverted from landfill, and you can see the other key areas where the product is actually diverted. And the main one, as you'll see when you add up the different coloured segments, is energy from waste, as we call it, so different types of energy from waste. Not ideal, and that's one of the challenges we face. It's better than putting it into the ground, but we need to find alternative solutions for use of carpet when it gets to end of life. But as I said earlier, we've gone from 2% to 70% diversion from landfill. As I just mentioned now, the majority of waste does go to energy from waste. But aside from that, equestrian is the biggest consumer of carpet waste, where equestrian manufacturers take the carpet, granulate it, and use it for equestrian surfaces. So that's one area where there's been some success, but again, there are issues there now with perception of microplastics going into the air on those surfaces. So again, that segment has got challenges that I'll come on to in a moment. Tonnage surveys. The information data, the data available to us as a carpet industry is arguably laughable. There is no accurate data at all. When we set up 16 years ago, there was nothing available. And even today, we talk to the Office for National Statistics and things like that, and they can't give us any accurate information as to the amount of material that is actually placed on market in any given year. So we're obliged to do that survey ourselves, and we do that in a number of ways. There is Prodcom, but again, that can only give us a little bit of information. So we do that by talking to manufacturers and asking how much has been placed on market. we talk to end users, we talk to waste management companies, because if you as consumers change your lounge carpet and you have the waste and you put it in the local tip, there's a waste management company involved at the end of that that takes that skip away and does something with it. So we garner data from them to give us as much information as possible about the scale of the issue. And all of that data collection tells us that roughly 467,000 tonnes was produced as waste in 2020. We've just started now for 2021, and the reason why we're always a year behind is because the waste management companies are always a year behind. So we're already historically gathering data that is 18 months, 2 years old, or will be by the time we report. And we're constantly looking for ways to actually get more information. One of the challenges the industry faces is that the manufacturing base is very disparate. The biggest single supplier to the carpet industry in the UK has less than 10% market share. So there's hundreds of companies supplying into the UK. So trying to get that information from all those people to give us a better idea and capture the placed on market information is a challenge, but it's a challenge that we're addressing, and we need to, so that we can talk more constructively with government and other bodies. And obviously we treat that information confidentially. Now, I'm not expecting you, particularly ones at the back, to read all of the words on this graph, but it's just an attempt to crystallise the complexity of the processes that go from physically making the carpet to its end of life, and all the different channels that are involved and possible alternative uses for that product. But I will be asking questions on that later, so stay awake, please. One of the issues we face as an industry is that the technology is quite old. Carpet production really was revolutionised in the 60s and 70s, and it's not changed much since then. And most carpet is made, it's like a sandwich almost, where you've got the bit on the top, which is the fibre, which could be polypropylene, polyester, nylon, wool. You've got the bit in the middle, which the fibre is sewn into to all intents and purposes. Then there's a bit on the back that's primarily polypropylene that gives it dimensional stability, which means that once it's installed in your home, it doesn't shrink. And that's all held together with latex. So even with some of the developments that were happening, the problem is separating the bits from that sandwich so we can reuse them. But some things are happening. One thing, single polymer advancement. So some manufacturers are now working on a single polymer polypropylene, for example, so that at its end of life, you can take that carpet and return it back to its original pellet form, so it's a true circular product. Problem with that at the moment is the difference between the cost price of that product and its current equivalent is too high, and consumers are not willing to pay so much of a premium for a truly circular product. Lots of companies are looking to alternatives for latex, which is a horrible product. So again, that's starting to happen, and we are actively working with the manufacturers to progress these developments as quickly as possible. On the wool side, wool's got a great story. Just talking to my colleague earlier from Hypnos about wool, and we all know about lovely lambs roaming in the fields and things like that, and it's great, and it's a great product. But what happens in the carpet industry is gets mixed with lots of other products. So at the end of life, it's not very usable in any shape or form. So what the wool carpet people need to do is develop new products that gives that product an opportunity to be reused at its end of life. And there are exciting developments coming on there. We're working with various academic research projects. In the last 12 months, we've worked with students from universities of Birmingham, one from Leeds, one from Lancaster, to actually undertake some new ideas for them to think outside the square, and outside the box, I should say, and think of new ideas. What can we do with all this carpet waste? The most recent one is potentially, apparently, carpet waste could be used as a fibre for 3D printing. Don't ask me how, but apparently that's something that could happen, and it's potential use. Companies are working on taking the carpet waste and turning it into liquid fuel through gasification pyrolysis. There's a company that is convinced that by attacking the carpet with steam, you can start to separate out the different components and take the bits that are of value and reuse those, and then look at the bits that are left and maybe put those to energy from waste. Still energy from waste, but it's a much smaller percentage, and again, it's not going to landfill. Chemical recycling is again being developed aggressively by a number of manufacturers. Long story short, again, I'm not a chemist, but you take the carpet, the end-of-life carpet, put it in a big bath, and fill it with chemicals. The good bit floats to the top, you skim that off. The bad bit floats to the bottom, you energy from waste it. It's better than putting it in landfill. An Aquafil, which is one of our members, it's as you can see up there, synthetic fibre and polymer producer. They're looking at a recycling plant in the UK where they can take the fibres and recycle them, and they're actually just developing a plant-based nylon, which will be a great story for the industry. Early stages, but it's very exciting. Jessica spoke this morning about legislation, so I'll just cover off how that applies to the carpet industry. RPS 248 relates to the equestrian sector. So the Environment Agency issued RPS 248 18 months ago with a view that it would ban the use of carpet waste in equestrian. We worked with the equestrian suppliers to combat that, and so far that's been delayed by the Environment Agency. We're still working with them to come up, if we can, with agreeable solutions. POPs, persistent organic pollutants, thank you. In soft furnishing, still going ahead. This is the part of the issue, is a lack of knowledge within the legislative bodies about carpets. People still think that every carpet has got horrible things sprayed upon it. That hasn't happened for years. The last time POPs were used in carpet manufacturing was back in 2004. The vast majority of those carpets have gone through the cycle and have reached the end of life some time ago. Certain legislative bodies still think carpets got a lot of POPs inside it. That's one of the challenges we face, and we're fighting against that. And again, because there are no guidelines and no official policies, we're working with manufacturers and other agencies to establish what those guidelines should be. Then we come on to the EPR scheme that, again, Jessica touched on this morning, and we've just heard about the packaging. This may well, I haven't had time to update my slide, Jessica, so I'm probably already out of date. But we know that it's coming. It's just a matter of when, not if. One of the issues we have as an industry is that there is a risk that carpets will just be lumped in with bulky household waste, and all will have one EPR for everything that makes up bulky household waste. So how can you have an EPR scheme for mattresses, for example, and for carpets that is the same? Because the two products are completely different. One of our many challenges. But we do see that it's a favourable tool. To be fair, it's something that's forcing the industry to look at itself and look at ways to be more sustainable in the long term. So, just quickly talk about our social media. Say we've got, again, these numbers are out of date. Our LinkedIn followers just topped 2,000 yesterday. So we're doing an awful lot on social media to engage with consumers and other industry bodies, to talk about the challenges that we face, and we help an awful lot in linking people together. So if somebody's got a carpet waste issue and somebody needs some carpet waste, they both talk to us and we link them and put them together and solve their mutual problems. You'll be pleased to know I'm not going to go through all of the events and presents in any detail. What I wanted to do was just highlight the one at the bottom, Carpet America Recovery Effort, CARE for short, thankfully. CARE is a company, an organisation based in California. Basically, the state legislature in California for a number of years now has the equivalent of an EPR in place. What CARE is a separate independent organisation, a little bit like Carpet Recycling UK. Basically, they take all the information from all the manufacturers who deliver product into California, and they charge them a levy. And they use that levy to fund recycling centres. So consumers in California, once they've finished with their carpet, they're encouraged to go to their local recycling point and drop off the carpet. So, and then that then is reused in various ways. And what's interesting is that the Californian government is regularly talking to CARE about the percentage of carpet diverted from waste. And in 2021, their percentage went down, so the California government is now fining CARE millions of dollars because they've not hit their target. I'm not saying the same will happen over here, but there are precedents. And California is the first state in the US to adopt an EPR program for carpet. New York at the end of last year just announced it's going to follow suit, and we know of at least 4 other states that are actively looking for an EPR scheme in the US. There we go. I'll rush through that because I know I was under time pressure. If we have any time.
I don't think we do,
We
I'm
don't.
afraid. We've got a
Right.
bit behind. So I'd like to, because I'm sort of conscious that we want to try and keep to them. But thank you so much. But as always, we will be having a networking break. Do speak to Mike if you have questions at that point. We're now going to bed. You like that, Luke? Angela Moran is joining us from Silentnight, and we'll talk about your approach to circularity within your business. Thank you.
Thanks very much. Well, it's really lovely to meet you all. I'm at the point of the day when a lot of people have already covered the things you were going to talk about. So let's just start on this. So hopefully I might just change some of what I was going to share with you, but I think I'm a big believer in industry collaboration, and I like to think about collaboration, because I think we are now at that point. We're in the 3rd year of this, what's called defining decade, and we need deeds, not words. So I think that's really where we are. And I just thought ESG has been mentioned a couple of times. It's really good to hear other people's interpretation of it, and I'd love to get together with those that are kind of on this journey maybe later, because I think it's a really good framework for understanding the societal and environmental impact of your business, and we definitely use it for that. But it's also thinking about how you embed it throughout, and I'm thinking about beehives and other things, but it'd be great to share some really good ideas there. And for us, it's really important for how we think about transitioning to be a circular business. And I think of, all brands are built on trust, and trust is really a promise, isn't it? It's a promise to be transparent, it's to be resilient, competent, and it's also about innovation, and it's the actions we take as a business to drive that innovation. So I just want to start with transparency. We've already touched on it. I don't think we need to say to anybody here that we're in a climate emergency. And a lot of people have talked about different schemes. So how many people here have actually measured their Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions? Just about most people? Yeah, good. So we're on that journey. How many's done the Scope 3? Quite a lot. That's really good. I mean, I suppose we're a select audience, if you like, but that was quite a big thing for us, because we realised after fiddling about trying to reduce our Scope 1 and Scope 2 that actually 91% of our emissions are in our Scope 3, so it's upstream and downstream. And that's why collaboration, industry getting together, because we're all in part of an emissions jigsaw and we can't do this on our own. So to me, a net zero plan is absolutely important. We needed a consultant to help us. We couldn't do it on our own. So if you haven't started, I suggest you look a few up, and we can recommend some and share ideas. And I just think, in the words of David Attenborough, we know what to do, we just need the will. So other things that are really important for us on transparency that have been touched on, I think the work that Jessica's headed up with the MBF and the circular economy and the eco-design toolkit is brilliant. We've been working with it for a couple of years now, testing it out, but it's really helping us focus on what we need to think about as a business. And we've touched on product passports and labelling. They're going to become more and more important. So we've got to be more transparent. So we're already adding things like our emissions, our chemical use, our recycled content to our bill of materials so that we can act ahead of that legislation that's going to be coming through. And in terms of being competent, a lot of it, we all know about the Green Claims Code. We've all changed our marketing stories. We've had to bring our marketeers on a journey. But evidence-based marketing is absolutely critical. And again, that helps focus us. And one of the things that's not been mentioned this morning, so I think it's worth talking about, is we don't know the answers in business. We need academics and we need research. And we actually use the Innovate UK Knowledge Transfer Partnership. Have people heard of that one? Because Jake, my colleagues here today, I can't find him in the audience now, but came through that process. He's now a full-time materials knowledge manager with us. But that's a really good way of bringing a business, academics together to solve a problem and actually developing an individual to be a future star within the business as well. So that's all really important to us. In terms of being resilient, we've talked about the legislation. If anybody can keep up, good to you. But this is, to me, is how ESG, we've got to think about what's going to come. We've got to act ahead of it coming. And I think we also need to listen to all our stakeholders. So I'm talking more about the E and the G today, but there's obviously the S element, which are our customers, our employees, our supply chain people. And I think it's really good. And one way that can help you know more about your business and where to go is to actually do an impact report. So I don't know if anybody done impact reports? Right, first. Simba, you've done impact report? Yeah? Yes, yeah. So I think, again, that's another way of just being really transparent. It makes you look in on your business and think about things like, what's material to your business? What are the risks and opportunities? So definitely worth looking. You can do very simple ones. And I think it's a really good, puts a stake in the ground as to where you are this year. And then the next year you'll look back on that year and you'll look at this year, then you look at the next year. And again, it just helps. It helps kind of diffuse ESG because it involves so many people within the business. It's not just a small sustainability team kind of in action. And the thing to me that's really come through with ESG, because I was a bit sceptical at first, and it's my job title, because I thought this is just a thing for investors. It's about due diligence, so that we're covering the E and the S as well as the kind of the profit of a business and its performance. But what we're really seeing, we're moving away from it just being about compliance and efficiency to it's been a true driver for innovation and growth. And if we need any thought to actually be challenging why we should be doing this, this came out of the World Economic Forum just a couple of weeks ago, and these are the top 10 risks that have been identified for businesses. And there isn't one blue economic risk in the next 2 to 10 years, and you don't need to see the detail, you just need to see how much green is in there. And that's where we need to be focusing. And it's not just about risk to business, because there are opportunities in risks. And that's what we need to focus on, and it needs to become more business as usual. So that kind of links nicely to when we work with Lucy Siegel. You might have seen her on the One Show. She's an environmental journalist. And she came out with this just last year, and I just thought this sums up where we are and where we all should be. So this is the age of the environmentalist. We're all environmentalists now. And my advice is to choose the deepest shade of green you can, as fast as you can. And that got us thinking because, we do work, we talked about it this morning, about your carbon footprints and how you can reduce your carbon footprint and how you can offset. But we need to go way beyond that now. We need to look at our carbon handprint. Who can we touch to help decarbonise to? How can we create a movement and a change and, as I say, get actions, not just words? So it's about changing our focus. And to help us, because it's such a massive field is this, and it's where do you start? So we kind of mapped it out. And I think the key thing is to think, we've got to think long term. in business, we're always thinking about what's happening this week, what's happening this month, what's happening this year. Will we deliver the budget? But we've got to take a step back and think about more long term. We need to think in decades. And that's difficult for us to do. But if you start with a net zero plan, that automatically focuses your mind to at least 2040, if not 2050. And that's quite difficult because I know I won't be working in 2040, but the team of people in that business will. So if you start with thinking about emissions and a net zero plan, it kind of then says why we need to move to a circular economy and how a circular business model is really vital. We've got to take this linear approach of extracting stuff, making stuff, and dumping it or burning it. And we need to keep some of the materials, particularly the oil-based ones, like our foams and polyesters that we use in massive amounts in our polythene, we need to keep them in circulation at the highest value. And that's what's really good to hear what John was just saying a minute ago. So, when it comes to circular economy, we found it quite difficult to explain that within our business because most people think it means recycling. So you could use, I read this the other day, the analogy of a book and a library. So if you go to a library, you get the book out, you use it, you take it back, it gets reused, it gets reused, it gets reused, and that can go on for years and decades. But if you think about getting a book and buying a book off Amazon, you read it, you bin it, it goes to be recycled, it gets pulped, and it becomes an egg box, and then it gets binned, and that's it. So it's thinking about that. So when you think about recycling, that's really just part of the linear economy. What we're talking about is keeping materials, as I say, at the highest value and in circulation. And that's why we need two things. We need the EPR scheme, which is really frustrating to hear that this morning, Jess, because I'm totally passionate about this. Because we often get asked by our customers, which is the most sustainable material? Is it a wool? Is it a foam? Is it polyester? Well, it's none of them. It's about a system. And I think you were touching on it. If there isn't a system in place, you can't make that claim. And all these materials have got value in different ways and different performances, but it's about putting a system in place. So we really need to push the government really, and I've made a note of my local MP, because he's not on your list, to go and challenge him about that. And to support EPR, we need the eco-design that I've touched on earlier. So again, to kind of make it simple in our business, what does eco-design mean? So as to pick three things that we focus on, it's moving towards more modular design. So if you think about a mattress, you've got springs and you've got fillings. Generally, other mattress people that are here, you know the springs will last for decades, but the fillings will generally collapse or deteriorate or become unhygienic. So why do we keep sticking them together? Because when the fillings have gone, the whole thing is then end of life. And we just moved to a modular construction on a particular product for a customer. And when we looked at the life cycle analysis of keeping the springs in circulation for 12 years, not just 6 years, and then replacing the topper just every 6 years, so separating the two, thinking about them differently, the savings in emissions were 23%. That's a massive way. You know, there's thousands of tonnes of savings just with one customer over a period of time. The other thing we need to think about is lightweighting. And this also goes against the grain. We like to put more springs in a mattress, the more the merrier. But actually, does it make a better performance for a mattress? Probably not. That's a marketing story. So we need to rethink that. And I think, as John was touching on, when you think about monomaterials, so let's try and separate the naturals from the polyesters and the synthetics so it aids end-of-life recycling. And one of the challenges we've had is bringing everybody in our business on board, particularly our marketing teams. So one of the things we've just started introducing is carbon literacy training. It's very widely available, it's fairly cheap, and if you go home with nothing else today, I suggest you really look up carbon literacy because it's 2 half-day courses and it really changes your kind of mind, your perspective, and it gives you a lot of confidence. So just thinking where we are now, and I love this from Einstein, because we need radical new thinking. The world we have created is a product of our thinking, and it cannot be changed without changing our thinking. And it's widely recognised, I think now, that sustainability is not enough. You know, we need to stop degenerating. We need to start thinking regeneratively, and we need to push for change. This is from Mike Berners-Lee, There Is No Planet B book, which Mike came to talk us at one of the Green Forum event, and changed kind of a lot of our thinking at Silentnight. And I love this little graphic because it's about, yes, we need to do things like cut our carbon or eat a plant-based diet or whatever, but it's more about the pushing for change. That's the bit. You know, the incremental actions and policies aren't enough. We kind of need transformational change. And there's two barriers at the moment that's stopping us moving to the circular economy in our industry as fast as we should. And one of them is plastic waste management. So this chart sort of takes a bed, and as you move away from that bed, you get an increasing environmental impact. So we need to think about end-of-life options. So when we design our products, we need to think what's going to happen to it in 10 years' time when it gets to a recyclers. And the main thing we need to avoid is landfill because of contamination, because of the waste of those materials. And we really need to avoid incineration as well, because that's only recycling it once. So more and more we need to be thinking about chemical recycling and mechanical recycling, and it's great to hear some of the things that have been talked about. However, chemical recycling is growing pretty fast in Europe, particularly for foams and fabrics. The challenge we've got in this country is we're still held in with these really outdated flam regs and the use of flame retardant chemicals, many of which, as we talked about today, are already decreed a POP. Those flame retardant chemicals in our foams and our fabric back coatings are disrupting the polymerisation process, the recycling process. So at the moment we're having to live with mechanical recycling, but I think as you're touching on, even that's got problems because of, mainly we think about it as polyester, we think about bottles. We all made a big story about bottles becoming fabrics, but really bottles should become bottles again. And we've got all the microplastic issue. So I haven't got the answers on this, but I think this is where coming together at events like this and sharing ideas is really, really key. And the last one, to me, it's a singularly the most challenging bottleneck in our journey to becoming circular, is having to work with these outdated policies that mean we've got to use flame retardants that aren't nice. So we all know, I'll just flick these up and read through them all. I think in a nutshell, we know that we've got the most stringent FR regs in the world, yet there's very little evidence to suggest that the use of the tons of flame retardant chemicals increase escape time, which at the end of the day is the very purpose of the regs. It's not to stop a product burning, it's to increase escape time so people can get out. But the work that Jake, my colleague's been doing with Professor Huller at UCLan is suggesting that two things. One is, despite the introduction of these regs, our fire deaths have only fallen in line with the rest of other economically developed countries. So something else has been contributing to that fall in fire deaths. And the other thing is that the flame retardant chemicals that we're putting on our products, whether they're brominated or whatever, are actually increasing smoke production. So here we are, we want somebody to get enough time to get out of a building when something's on fire, and the flame retardants are causing more smoke, so you can't see your way through, and the actual chemicals they're giving off are actually asphyxiating you quicker. So half the fire deaths in the UK are down to smoke inhalation. And I could go on, and some of this might be slightly controversial. We're happy to share the work we've been doing. We met with BEI's ops team recently because we just feel we need to push for change in this. We're all frustrated, even the BEI's ops team are frustrated about the lack of progress because of what's going on in government. But I would just say, let's do more together. Let's share it. There might be some flaws in our thinking and arguments, but let's get together and talk about them, please. We need more urgent action and we need more holistic thinking, not more regrettable substitution. And so, that's a whistle-stop tour of Silentnight. And I'd just like to finish this with, sorry, where have we gone? There we go. That's a whistle-stop tour of Silentnight, and I'd just like to kind of finish with this question. This is what drives me personally. When I think about children, and my children's children, and my children's children's children that I might not even meet, but when they ask me in my dreams, what did I do while the planet burned, I want to say honestly, and I hope we can all say honestly, that we actually did enough. And that's why these events and this collaboration and collaboration and longer term thinking is so essential for our survival. So thank you for hosting this event and for getting some great speakers and thinkers to come along. And that's me, thank you.
Angela, thank you so much.
You're welcome. Is there any questions? Or
Well, I think I was going to say we're already sort of quarter of an hour late, so
Okay.
can I suggest that we have just a quarter of an hour break for tea and grab Angela at that point, or after we finish this afternoon, there's still plenty of time for networking, but finishing on that point I think was quite meaningful. And I say that as someone who doesn't have children, so thank you. So if we could have a quarter of an hour and then come back, thank you.